Hello, movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about Season 2 of Spec Ops Lioness. I had covered the first season of this last year or the year before. I cannot really remember when this show first aired. This is the military thriller show starring Zoe Saldana that Taylor Sheridan created. He writes this, he directs this. In Season 1, I remember being pretty critical of this television series. I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I very much love Zoe Saldana, and I liked her character, and I liked a lot of the things that were going on, but I was pretty critical because I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of her children, not necessarily both children, but I didn't really enjoy, let's say, the way that her eldest daughter was written. I didn't make it that far into Season 1 in the first place. I think I only made it to about 5 episodes before I gave up and kind of stopped watching. I didn't really like how her daughter was written, for one, and then I did not like the character of Cruz, which was the lioness that they sort of pulled in and trained to go in and be sort of like the person who gets close to the mark, so to speak. And it really is nothing to do with the actresses themselves. I just wasn't a fan of how Taylor Sheridan had specifically written those characters. And so it kind of ruined the remainder of the show for me, that those characters were ones that I just didn't enjoy. I liked Zoe Saldana. I like her team. I like sort of the idea of the show, the concept of the show. But there were just some characters that stood out that I was like, I don't like these characters. And so it's hard to sit through the show because these are main characters. They're around a lot more. So I did go back, because Season 2 is out now. I did go back and rewatch the entirety of Season 1. My feelings are the same about those two characters. I still hold to that for sure. I did make it all the way through. I will stand by kind of what my rating for that first season was. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of it, but I do see what the draw is. And I did want to give Season 2 a go just to see, is there improvement here? Is there not? Has the show kind of taken a different direction? Is it the same sort of thing? With a lot of these shows, sometimes it's difficult because you can look at it and go, well, is the show going to progress and kind of move in a direction? Do we get to see these characters continue to sort of grow and morph? And that is one thing that I feel like I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of in Season 1. Is you already had like Zoe Saldana, who plays the character of Jo, and she is really just like this badass. She is a force to be reckoned with. I think that Zoe Saldana does an amazing job in this show, and I like her crew and what they're doing, but you didn't necessarily see the progression in Cruz's character to that point. It was like she was always sort of unstable or always on the verge of being unstable, and you didn't see her kind of progressing into becoming that sort of lioness character, a la the same as Zoe Saldana's, right? Like how she's been kind of through the ringer and is leading this team now. And so my thought process is that these women who she's training up as lionesses, the ones that make it out the other side, are going to make it out the other side like stronger for it. And that didn't seem to be the case in how Taylor Sheridan had written the girl that played opposite of her, essentially. And so in Season 2, I am sort of a little bit more excited. I will say I've watched the first 2 episodes that have released so far. I'm assuming that they're going to do 8. I think it was 8 for the first season, or 10 episodes. I think it was 8. I'm assuming they're going to do about the same amount of episodes for Season 2, potentially a little bit more, because Season 1 did do so well as far as like ratings and stuff, obviously, to be renewed for a second season. I was surprised, maybe a little bit, to see that we are just going with a completely new lioness trainee this season. I'm shocked and not shocked at the same time. Like, I feel like potentially Taylor Sheridan took some of the criticism that he may have gotten from Season 1 and changed things up a little bit. I have noticed that though we do still have time with her family and that interaction there hasn't been as much in the first 2 episodes as there was in like the first season. And we are only 2 episodes in, so I don't know if that will change. But the first season leaned pretty heavily on that. The second season seems to lean pretty heavily on more so the action. And I feel like those are definitely some of the stronger elements of the show in the first place, right? So it is cool to kind of see that that has changed up quite a bit. Of course, Zoe Saldana comes back in and is just the same badass. Her eldest daughter, unfortunately, still seems to be being written the exact same way. I'm not sure why that is, because I'm taking into account that I figure the second season of Spec Ops Lioness is several years potentially into the future from that first season, because her daughter is up and walking around and doing her own thing. And, you know, she had that terrible accident from the first season, which they weren't sure whether she was going to be walking. She seems to appear perfectly fine at this point. So I feel like we've had some considerable time pass between season 1 and season 2. They are also in a different home, like in a brand new house. So, you know, they've changed locations. They are living somewhere else, potentially stationed somewhere else at this point. But again, I feel like the one thing that I will be eager to see whether or not this works out. They do have a new sort of lioness character, like I mentioned. They've cast Genesis Rodriguez in this show to be sort of the opposite, if you will, of Zoe Saldana. So she's the new lioness operative that's coming in. And for some reason, I don't know if this is a Taylor Sheridan thing. I am assuming so because, again, he's the one that's writing and directing the show. For some reason, I feel like Taylor Sheridan is really excellent at writing those characters like Zoe Saldana's and like the ones that we saw in Yellowstone, those like really badass female characters. He's really good at writing those. But for some reason, he either can't allow or just doesn't want or like doesn't enjoy the idea of having more than one of those characters be on screen at the same time, because it seems like we get Zoe Saldana, and then with Genesis Rodriguez already out of the gate, she seems a lot more emotional in terms of what's going on. And that was sort of one of the sticking points of why I wasn't necessarily the fan of Cruz in the first season, is because it just sort of seems like she was always just ready to cave and always just ready to cry and always, you know, and you have to imagine like this isn't a regular drama. We're talking about military operatives who, I'm not saying that people who are in the military are not meant to have emotions by any means, but it's like once you've been in the military and you've seen some of the things that you've seen and been through some of the stuff that you've been through, especially in the context of the show where they're under gunfights and explosions and all of these things that are happening all the time, you do sort of develop a thicker skin. You have to. It's imperative to do that, not only to protect yourself, but to ensure the protection of your team, right? And Zoe Saldana does definitely like break down in moments, but I feel like hers are written a little bit differently. Like she usually will have more emotional moments around a time when, for instance, in season 2, they have, you know, a couple of gunfights or something happened where it's a few seconds difference between whether she survived or not. And then she's thinking of her family and thinking how close it came to like losing her life and losing her ability to go back to them. And that's when she's sort of having these breakdown moments. Whereas in season 1, and now we've seen it in season 2, these opposite sort of female characters are sort of breaking down over much less, like much less things. They're breaking down over, I've fallen in love with the mark, you know, which is something that I feel like a military person potentially would not do. I found that to be a little bit unbelievable in season 1, which is neither here nor there really at the end of the day. And then in season 2, she's already kind of broke Genesis Rodriguez's character and made her cry within the first 5 minutes. So it's like, I don't necessarily enjoy that. I really would rather see kind of the sort of more badass characters that you just get to see kind of doing this job that is a hard one, is a difficult one, does require you to have kind of that fortitude of character. and go in and do these really difficult missions. That is the whole point of this Lioness crew, right? So I just wish that maybe Taylor Sheridan would stop making one of them like cry every couple of scenes. It just seems a little unbelievable to me. But I am definitely, I think, my curiosity is more piqued in season 2 than it was in season 1. Like, this already out of the gate feels like it's just like found its footing and found its sort of groove to sit into. And so I'm more interested, I think, to see if they will kind of do that progression of character with Genesis Rodriguez that I was hoping that they would do with the Cruz character in season 1. Like, see that progression of her really sort of find her way and find herself and like lean into more of that Zoe Saldana character, lean into that Lioness role, and really kind of have that character development that I think that we were lacking in the first season. So we will find out. But I am definitely enjoying season 2 more so than I enjoyed season 1. So 2 episodes in, I already enjoy it more than I enjoyed the entire season of the first. So I am curious to see how this goes. I'm curious to see what Taylor Sheridan does with it. Of course, we see him in this season as well. Taylor Sheridan has taken on a character, a role in it, which he does in a lot of his shows. We've seen him in Yellowstone. We've seen him in some other stuff that he has written as well. So not really too surprising to see him show up in Lioness, but it is interesting to sort of see those characters kind of come into it, and we have some new faces in this season, which is nice. So I am definitely looking forward to Spec Ops Lioness season 2, seeing the remainder of it. I would love to know what you guys are thinking of this season so far with the first 2 episodes. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.